Cool. I think we're good to go, right? Everybody good? Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Social Innovation Summit. The panel on diversity, design, and multicultural marketing. My name is Matamoros, Managing Director of Unreasonable Group. I'm going to be moderating today this very highly esteemed panel who have all agreed to be here and give their thoughts on, what is probably one of the most pressing topics of the day, and one I think it's important to address and to really explore. So we appreciate everybody showing up, and again, especially our panelists here to share their experiences and their thoughts with us. The format's gonna be pretty easy. We have some questions at the beginning that I'll be throwing out, and each panelist is gonna be responding to them. And then on the latter half of the session, you're gonna have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. If you'd like, you're gonna see a Q&A button at the bottom. Even as they're speaking, you can go ahead and ask questions. We'll try and choose a few at the end. We're gonna let them answer the questions that we have set up first, and then we're gonna have some of the questions that you have afterwards. So please do feel free to type questions in there as they come into your head, and then we'll try and get to as many as we can. Cool. Well, welcome once again. And to start out, as you can see here, we have 5 panelists who are going to be speaking. And what I would love for each of you, if you wouldn't mind, in just about a minute's time, starting with Linda, is just to talk a little bit about your role, where you're calling in from, and then just a special project that you're finding exciting right now.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. Hello, welcome. I'm thrilled to be here. And my name is Linda Brandt, and I lead the Herman Miller Group Philanthropy and Social Impact work through our foundation and corporate giving worldwide. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Herman Miller, but what you may not realize is although we're headquartered in Michigan, which is where I'm calling in from, many people don't know that we currently have a collection of 8 leading global brands that we own, including DWR, Herman, Geiger, CBS, Hay, Not One, and Mars. And soon we'll be adding Knoll to the list. So we're currently a $2 billion company, and with the acquisition of Knoll, that will roughly double later this year. We currently have about 8,000 employees worldwide, and 30% of our employee base is international. And I lead up to, I tell you all this to lead up to the fact that our differentiator is our obsession with design and diversity. Our corporate purpose statement is designed for the good of humankind, and design thinking has an impact on every single thing we do. And diversity in all its forms, we truly believe is essential to good design. So we're really honored to be part of this panel discussion. And I want to share one very exciting thing we're working on. There's lots of exciting things we're working on, but the timing of this was perfect. We're going to be announcing next week officially the Diversity in Design Collaborative, and it will launch nationwide. It's a group of companies that believe in the power of design and recognize that diversity is our greatest creative advantage, but they also all understand the statistics show a shocking, horrific lack of diversity in design professionals across the board. So the group of companies that have joined this collaborative are all committed. We've been meeting for a few weeks, and we're engaging in very specific collective actions that will change these statistics. The website will launch next week officially, and the Social Innovation Summit team has guaranteed that we will make sure every one of you get the link and you can engage in any way that may interest you. There's been significant media attention. This topic is very interesting. A lot of media outlets want to know more. So we're thrilled to be able to contribute to that. And also in September, we're being featured in Detroit Design Month with a panel that includes Dwayne Edwards. You may have heard of him. He founded the Pencil Academy, and he's been one of our key advisors all along. So stay tuned, more to follow. But when Wayne asked us to talk about an exciting thing that's going on, I couldn't resist. I'm going to pass it now to Sheila Wood, who's with me from Herman Miller, and she has much, much deeper expertise than I have on this topic. So thanks, glad to be here. And here you go, Sheila.
You're on mute, Sheila.
Sorry about that. I feel like it's not a virtual call if someone forgets that they're on mute, but I am thrilled to be here. I am an application design specialist in new product development. Using my interior design background, I support our global workplace portfolio on our product launches. And right now, I am most excited about working on OE1 Workspace Collection, which is a grouping of agile products that are highly agile and being able to reconfigure for diverse work environments. So just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sheila, and welcome. We appreciate you being here as well. Let's keep going around to Bassima, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor as well. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of SkinTē. It's a health and beauty company. Our mission is to unleash health and beauty from the inside out every day. It was founded by 3 women. We all went through major breakdowns in our lives that led to breakthroughs. And so, what happened last year, our muscle just kicked right in with COVID. And, we grew 300% last year. We're so grateful. And if anything, resilience is the big thing that we've learned. I'm a global citizen myself. I'm Lebanese by origin, Lebanese American, raised in West Africa, lived in Canada. So I believe diversity and inclusion is in my core. And it's interesting that it has to be a topic, but I'm really glad that it is. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation today.
Welcome, Bassima. Thanks so much. Pinar?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Pinar Guvenc. I'm partner at Sara. We are an architecture and design studio with the mission of addressing social and urban problems. And how we do that is through sustainable and inclusive design processes. As a mission-driven studio, we have a very robust research agenda that we're also very big on having it very collaboratively and diverse. And so even though we are a much more boutique company compared to Herman Miller, we feel like we have a global and very big team that are very diverse, not only in discipline, but backgrounds and race and ethnicity and abilities that we work with on an ongoing basis. Currently, we're working on actually many cool projects, so it's hard for me to prioritize one, but I guess we are actually working on different product categories these days to make them more inclusive of people with disabilities. And we have projects currently in personal care, food packaging, beverages, and actually like many more. But I guess one project that was recently launched is a project that we worked with Unilever on, and it was the redesign of a roll-on deodorant bottle to make the bottle itself inclusive in its application and for people with upper body limitations or visual impairment. And I think it's a great case study to show how through inclusive design, something can be a huge success, because the product on its own, after it's launched, got, I think, 2 billion impressions across all media platforms and is now shortlisted for awards. And even though we are very happy to, take credit on product design, also it did happen because we co-designed and collaborated with people with disabilities as we were working on the project. So I think that is very important to share, as it's how we work in our process, and that's what true diversity and inclusion means for us. So happy to be here.
Welcome, Bernard, and thank you. And definitely, last but not least, Sonia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited. I am Global Marketing Director for OkCupid. And OkCupid, we are known as exclusively inclusive. So we are the only dating app that has 22 gender options, 20 orientation options, and then also 60 identities. A really exciting project I'm working on right now is, every day I wake up, I get to spread love. Well, now we're launching in Germany, and it's going to be a big launch coming soon in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So just excited to be able to tap into the various cultures and connect people who may never ever been able to find each other. But with OkCupid, we really, really focus on matching on what matters and getting into the heart and soul of matches and what's important to the users. So excited to be here. And I'm from West Africa too. So Bassima, we have to connect.
Excellent.
I love it,
that.
my sister.
And thank you so much, Sonia. Thank all of you for the introductions. So we're going to start with, I think, a bit of an obvious question, but one that I think will have a range of answers. But what does diversity and inclusion mean to you? How do you explain it to somebody? Anybody want to take a first crack at that?
I can go since I already alluded to it a little bit. So I think, as a design studio for us is really important to incorporate it in any stage. And for us, what inclusion means is really designing inclusively, and this starting even with design research and then continuation of ideation of the design with the community or the end user, and really collecting feedback on prototypes or concepts that we're generating. And I think, we've seen many examples in many other industries over time where to be able to say that we're diverse or inclusive, brands or companies have done, focus groups, asked questions and then disappeared from their lives, which we know do not necessarily create inclusive results, nor when, the entire design process sort of is not designed to be inclusive, and then the marketing content or the end messaging is trying to have representation, and then suddenly the messaging doesn't come off authentic or doesn't resonate with communities. So we see over and over again that if we don't have it within our process genuinely, it actually fails, and it's bad for business. And I think really treating diverse communities as co-collaborators or co-creators in projects already allows you to be 10 steps ahead when you're starting. So I think we do need to, it is ironic that, the design field is by nature very collaborative, or should be very collaborative, but it's interesting to see that it's not always is. So I think we really have to sort of immerse ourselves in the process to be inclusive and diverse, and not just only certain stages of the process.
Excellent. No, thank you. Yes, Bassima.
Sure. Yeah, I can go next. I completely agree with what you're saying, Pinar. I think for me, it's at the highest level, diversity and inclusion is a way of being. It's being human. And I think when I really think about my personal background and how that leads to how I think about running SkinTē, there's the basic stuff that we talk about, like diversity on my board is very, very strong. Diversity on my team is really, really strong. But there's also diversity of thought. And then there's the thought of, diversity of backgrounds, even in terms of functional areas. I'm a huge believer that a diverse team is going to be more innovative no matter what. It's going to be more difficult to manage just because you have more opinions, but that's actually a good thing. And how do you take that and create something tremendous from that? And so from a SkinTē perspective, as 3 female founders, when we designed the can, and one thing I am excited to talk about is this campaign we're going to be launching around beauty comes in all stripes, which really has a nod to the design of our can, which was extremely colorful, unapologetically colorful and inclusive of a strong color palette. I know that's just color, but the layers were also meant to illustrate the depths within us and the diversity within us as human beings. So I think there's multiple levels to what diversity and inclusion means, including accepting the different parts of you as a person, all the way through to what's more outward facing, that's more popular in terms of conversation. So for me, when I think about my experience at Nike, or I'm on the board of the Sara Blakely Foundation, or now with this startup, the common thread for me has been when we're just being human and we're really looking at all these different perspectives, this is when it starts to really work. And it's an exciting time. We're now being kind of forced to design diversity and inclusion into things, but I can't wait for it when it just becomes a natural way of being. So that's my perspective on it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to add something to that? I guess if I could just call on somebody, sorry, Sonia, but I'm curious, especially looking at it from a global marketing angle, and giving kind of that massive remit. How do you see diversity and inclusion?
Now, from the OkCupid standpoint, and really focusing on diversity and inclusion, what we try to do is try to understand what's important in the culture and the market as far as the matching and what matters to them. So for instance, in India, where there's a lot of stigmas on dating apps, what we do is we turn that around on its head. So it's find someone you love. So we, had this major billboard that just kind of dissected what people would expect of your normal match, like having your mom or dad match you or going to a matchmaker. And then just inserting it with like, what would happen if I actually got to pick somebody on my own through a dating app? And that actually is a whole nother level of inclusion. And you actually unlock a lot of diversity in that way because you're allowing people to meet people on their own terms. So it's a little different way of spinning diversity and inclusion, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to include everybody, in that. So that's the unique thing about OkCupid I'm proud of, is that we really, really pride ourselves on including whatever you're looking for, and making you feel comfortable while you're doing it.
Excellent, thank you so much. Anybody else? Herman Miller side,
Yeah.
any additions?
And Sheila, you can comment. I could read your comments, but I think you'd be a much better person to give the group a sense.
Yeah, no, I think that these are all really great points. And to me, and I think speaking for Herman Miller, it's just being able to create inclusive spaces where you're kind of removing those barriers for people so they can show up as their whole selves and just be more productive and focus on their jobs and not worrying about, how is this chair going to work for me? Is this table going to work for me? So just kind of removing those barriers.
And you know what, I'm going to add something to what the two last speakers mentioned, because internationally, if we had a panel internationally having this discussion, it would be very interesting how some of the perceptions would be different, but the diversity of thought is so critical to Herman Miller. And with 30% of our employees internationally, that's a big piece of what goes into the design of everything we do. So I just wanted to highlight that was mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point to build on, because I would love to hear from each of you, where have you seen various elements of diversity? And it could be diversity of thought, but I think also other forms of diversity. Where have you seen it have a positive impact on a business, a product, a service that any of you might know?
Yeah, I can share an example of that with Herman Miller. So being in product development, I just think it's very important to have a wide range of different viewpoints. So if you just have like white male designers, you are just going to see different perspectives. And an example that I had recently was with this new product that I'm working on. Being able to take into account like what monitor height would work for different heights. And I had a hard time getting the understanding, I guess, with these designers that we were working with, because it wasn't a problem for them. And so I think that's just being able to have more people with different backgrounds have a seat at the table and be a part of the conversation in the product development process so we can get ahead of it before it reaches market.
Excellent. No, thank you. Great example. And I saw, I think Bassima seemed like she was agreeing violently. Did you have a particular example or something with SkinTē where you felt that it made a big difference?
Yeah, I can approach it from probably a bit of a different angle, which is from an entrepreneurial standpoint, the corporate versus the entrepreneurial thinker, right? And I feel like, sometimes there's this perception that, big corporate only, when I was at Nike, for example, you're huge and you're corporate, but you want the entrepreneurial thinkers, and we call them intrapreneurs. And then when you're a startup, you also want a mix of both. So when I was hiring for the team, there was the really scrappy type people that could make anything stretch in terms of budget and make it work. And that was really important from a diversity standpoint, but also hiring people with corporate experience that were excited about being part of something small. That's when I was thinking of diversity of thought. To your point, sometimes they might not understand each other's perspective, and that's okay. Because on one side, they feel process matters. On the other side, it feels like you're wasting my time. So that's just a different lens on it from a kind of startup phase. And I think of every phase of a company's growth, from startup to the growth that you get, you have to really think about the mix that you want at the table and how important that is. Because as you grow, it's so funny, you kind of want to go back to when you were smaller and remain and keep some of that cultural DNA. So.
Excellent, great, no, thank you. Additions to that, any examples where you've seen inclusion and diversity really just creating a much better experience or product for somebody?
I will say, just to add, one unique feature of OkCupid, last summer we redesigned the app where we call it Stack, but it's really, you know, a navigation bar at the top where you can match on certain ideas. So like there's a Black Lives Matter badge we had, now we have a vaccination badge. Imagine the way we look at it from our standpoint is like you can have a seat at a lunch table and have a conversation with people and like kind of all share ideas together. And what it allows us to do is we're able to tap in and diversify culturally within each country and have local stacks. You know, so if it's even something as far as a football team in Europe that you might like, or even take it here in the US, like Steelers versus the Ravens, like you can match on things together. And it just allows for a lot more conversation, which we think is like, you know, just to continue to get to know people and have a better understanding of each other. So that's one thing, one feature that I was really proud of that we launched last year.
Yeah, good example. Linda or Pinar? Yeah, Linda.
Yeah, I'd like to, this is a great question because Herman Miller is such a large company and we are getting larger, but we have formed what we call equity teams. And there's 7 or 8 equity teams and they represent different elements of diversity. So we have an LGBTQ+ team, we have a racial equity team, we have a disability team. And through these teams, we've created these videos every month called The Lens. And we ask people to share lived experiences and they're broadcast around the whole company. And I have to tell you, these Lens videos will, the passion and the emotion that comes out when you actually allow people from different backgrounds, different cultures, just different environments to share in what they perceive to be a safe space has been really, really helpful for a global company. Because your point about a small company, 20, 50, 100 people, can get in a room and talk, 8,000 people can't. But we can change our culture if we allow the people in our company to share their lived experiences. That's been a very, very powerful way for us to influence everybody in our company, including the designers.
Thank you so much. And Pinar?
I mean, I think it's perfect to add to that. Any project that sort of recognizes lived experiences as an expertise is already a better project because it's really impossible to, I mean, you can empathize, but it's impossible for you to really understand what's going on the other end. What Bassima talked about, you know, when you have diverse teams, it's probably more difficult to work with, but for a better reason. And it's true because, you know, when we're coming to the table, everybody is coming in with their own perceptions, prejudices, baggages, right? Like cultural baggages, and all of those are actually going into the mix of the ideation, which is so crucial. Otherwise, we would be creating biased products. And I do want to highlight again, you know, people with disabilities, like my experience working with them is like, I feel like I'm working with innovators all the time because they, on a day-to-day basis, need to hack their environments because our environments are mainly inaccessible, which is mind-blowing to us. And this goes back to like why we even need to have a conversation on diversity, because, you know, we're all aging, we're all going to experience some form of a disability if we haven't already in our lives. Like pregnancy is a temporary disability, and people with disabilities is the largest minority in the world. And yet, you know, we do see so many products designed still to this day inaccessibly. And this is this would not happen if we sort of, you know, bring that expertise at the table during the product development stage, right? And I think there is certainly more conversation around it as we're seeing more business opportunity around it, as we are having a growing aging population, and that is potential business for so many brands. But it is important to sort of highlight that we need to take lived experiences as expertise and compensate accordingly when we are engaging team members and groups and communities into the process.
Excellent. Thank you so much. For the record, I'm not aging. I decided that recently, but it still applies. So from all of your answers, yeah, I love the answers because in one way or another, they all have empathy at the core, which I think is really important. And it sounds, the way you explain it sounds so obvious. Yeah, I think we all know, I think Linda used the word horrific in terms of the track record of many businesses, and especially in fields of design and product development, the track record of hiring truly diverse backgrounds. And so I'd love to explore a little bit, what do you see as the biggest barriers? Like, why is this not happening? If everything you're saying, which again, it makes so much sense, what's the barrier? You know, what are the biggest barriers that you're seeing?
Speaking from, oh, you can go first.
Shall I go? Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Let's hear Sheila real quick, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of the perspective of being at a larger global company, it's more of, I mean, making money, I guess, and it's hard to build a case for where they might see not as much of a return on it. Like, why would we invest in it? But building the case and then also kind of taking it outside of, it might, I guess, for example, like ramp access for wheelchairs, like that serves a great purpose for wheelchairs, but then it also, if someone has a stroller or anything on wheels, it's easier for them to get into. And so I think building that business case and being really intentional that to be able to prove that like return on investment.
Excellent, thank you. Pinar, you had a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree on that. It still does require education and awareness on, you know, how this is a much greater potential than just, you know, maybe like serving a small community, which, you know, I think in the end, we're also entering a time where thankfully the next generations do want to use and shop from brands that are that have social responsibility agendas. And I think regardless of whether you belong in a community, I think we're going to see more and more people just wanting to be part of brands that are actually more conscious of it too. So with that, I mean, that's a good thing, but what a barrier that we see as more of a growing studio, you know, when you try to hire in a more diverse manner or even do collaborations, it does really require for you to do your work. And so you really do need to be intentional about it. And if you do want to actually have an inclusive team on a project, it takes maybe twice the time to find the people, because though so many of these communities are not either provided access, they did not have the education to get the exposure that you want them to have. So it's really, you really have to sort of go out of your way to be able to like achieve that collaboration. And that is, I guess, responsibilities of, you know, hiring teams at larger corporations, and for, you know, more leaner teams like SkinTē or us. Like, I think we really just need to do twice the work to make sure that happens, but it has to start somewhere, right? Like, we actually need to do it now for in the future for this to be just a normal process. And we don't even talk about diversity and inclusion anymore, or don't have to.
Anybody else?
I have to comment here because this is so near and dear to our heart. It is so clearly a pipeline issue when you look at early childhood and how so many children are not even exposed to art in the environment in which they grow up. And then the schools no longer are funded for art programs, so they don't get the exposure in the schools. Then they get to high school, and there's, as Sheila said, the parents are talking to them about, make sure you are focused on a career that makes lots of money. Well, art and design isn't perceived as that type of career. And there isn't recruitment from large corporations at the community colleges or the HBCUs or some of the schools that need to bring a diverse representation into design. That's what we have to change. And that's what this Diversity and Design Collaborative is focused on. So it starts with early childhood, and it's a pipeline issue all the way down the line.
The only thing I would add to that just briefly is I think there's an inherent unconscious bias. Like I've been raising money and fundraising, less than 2% of women and even less African-American women get funding. And I'm in front of these investors and they're looking at someone that doesn't look like them. And Wayne, you were saying how culturally you're always happy. And, you know, I'm Lebanese too, and I'm expressive and I'm bubbly. Maybe someone thinks I'm stupid because I'm not, you know, speaking in a certain way intelligently. And I remember changing my personality when I went to larger companies a little bit in the beginning, thinking, oh, I need to appear a certain way. They're going to think I'm this, you know, flimsy girl. But if it was more, I think it's inherently people are good is a belief system I have, but people are afraid. Like if they're not looking at someone who looks like them or speaks like them or talks like them, and there's a little bit of a fear of what kind of a risk am I facing to bring them in. There's courage involved in that. And I also think I'm very lucky to have lived in so many different countries and seen different cultures. I wish part of school systems was that everyone had a mandatory, like, let's go around the world. And if we could ever afford that kind of a system, that's a better education, I believe, than just doing calculus all day, personal opinion. But I believe that exposure is what will make us as a humanity, empathy and understanding each other. It's just game changing. I've seen that where you see someone that might have had very biased beliefs about a person, spent just a couple of days with them, how that changed their perception of that entire group of people. So
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sonia, any thoughts, barriers, challenges? What is it that you're seeing?
You know, I think bias is always going to be there, which is challenging. I know from my own experience, the opportunities just sometimes we don't even know are there. So I think even just from like go through your elementary and your junior high, your high school experience, just to be exposed to various disciplines, you know, whether it is the arts,
Right.
whether it's an engineer, whether it's a lawyer, because you think of like the common jobs. But I know for me, I've always tried to expose the youth into roles that they might not have ever heard of, like IT, you know, or I have a friend who is a linguist, you know, just there's so many other areas, but it's just about having that exposure so they even know what their opportunities are, you know.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. Some of the questions are coming in, and Caroline's talking about the pipeline problem. And I think, as you mentioned, exposure is part of this, but she goes on to talk about what else can companies do in order to create this pipeline? You know, what are the different types of investments or actions that can be taken? So I'd be curious to hear either, you know, something that you have implemented or you'd like to implement that you think would actually help, you know, to close that gap that exists right now.
I can talk more on the side of like a smaller business, and I'm sure at you know, Herman Miller, there is a much like a bigger conversation as like corporate pipeline. But I think what even as a smaller business you can do is really represent if you're in the seat of representing, right? Like I think in my experience when I became a mom 3 years ago, and up until that point, like in business meetings, it felt like if you somehow bring up something about your child or you being a mom is a weakness, right? And I also working also a lot within the real estate industry, being majority men, saw many women having to act like men so they also fit in. And that doesn't help the next generation of women who are trying to get into that industry. So I felt very responsible about being real about my situation. And, you know, I'm Turkish American, I'm also very bubbly and I smile a lot. And I sort of, but it comes later, right? Like early in my career, I was more conscious of it. I was trying to be more serious. Okay, maybe I should look more professional or shouldn't say something, you know, more personal. But I think what is happening then is that we're not necessarily helping the next generation who is trying to come into this space. So I think being true to yourself and authentic where you are and in your position, and really like support other moms who are trying to be in a very competitive industry as well. And really sort of taking that as like part of your identity and owning that and saying, yeah, like actually being a mom makes me a more efficient person and a better business person. Or, you know, I actually do believe like if we smile every now and then, we'll feel much better in a meeting, right? So I think really sort of being yourself and not having to pretend like others, because that's not going to help for the next generations coming in. And so we have to own who we are in the space that we are.
Great comment.
Thank you. Yeah,
I just wanted to add, when I was a senior in high school, I was part of this program where they would train young minority youth to act a certain way in order to get interviews. So we were all robots. We had to dress a certain way. They showed us how to use a fork, how to talk. And it actually just scared me into being someone who I wasn't. So I was entering corporate jobs that I didn't feel comfortable in. I couldn't really be myself because they wanted to train us so that we wouldn't act the way we are, so that we could fit in. And I don't think this generation is going to be open to that anymore. I think those days are over. I really do.
I agree.
That's a good one.
Knock on wood. But yeah, definitely agree. And anybody else?
Wayne, could I just one comment, because we're the big elephant corporation in the room, but the one thing that I think we do and other corporations have to do is seek out nonprofits that are doing really good work in communities, because we need to connect the students. And the question that the chat raised about the pipeline, early in students' lives, we need to connect them with organizations that can expose them to the various types of careers. Hip Hop Architecture is one that we support. The Interact Project, Maurice Woods, is one we support. Esther Choi with Office Hours. There are so many great nonprofits out there that are doing really wonderful things. And I think we, the corporations that support them, need to get better at shining a light on these nonprofits so that all of you that own businesses or work in companies can engage in a way that works for you. So,
thank you. Any last comments on that before I move on? Most everybody went? Okay, excellent. There's a good question from Jonathan. How do you make D&I efforts more pervasive and distributed? And he uses, i.e., as opposed to here it is in the corner, how do you actually make sure that it's something that's integrated throughout your organization? And I think somebody else had asked about small business, advice for small businesses. So I think this actually applies to small businesses as small businesses with the plans to grow so that it grows integrated, but then also big businesses. Sorry, Herman Miller again. How do you make sure that it is really throughout the organization and not isolated in one corner without as much impact as it should have?
right.
As a small business, what I can say to that just real quickly is it's actually great to be a small business because you can integrate it from day one. It's harder to change behavior later. So I think for me, from early on, we were minorities, three women starting this company, but also with the team that we hired, it was such a mix of diversity and it felt so natural to me. Someone told me, gosh, you have the United Nations on your board. And I was like, I didn't really realize it, but it was built into it. So I feel like for a startup, you have such a beautiful opportunity and it doesn't have to cost you a lot. And the question around budget, I think, was related to websites. And the best advice I can give to anyone starting up is passion. If you show your passion, that ends up equating to free resources or a big decrease. It's funny, I've worked for people who are very wealthy and do really well. And one of the funny things is, gosh, every time I go out to an organization to get services, they want to jack up the price by 10. If you're a startup and you're passionate and you've got a great story and you touch their heart, you're going to get a discount. You're going to get some free services. That's how SkinTē got off the ground. And you never forget those people. Those are people for the rest of your life that you will help and give back to. So I feel the designing into it is really an honor. And then when you're a larger company, I'll definitely let the guys here, but when I think of Nike and the others, the education becomes so important and the experience versus people in my company right now, it's kind of embedded and they haven't seen anything different when they started working there. An expectation is kind of set early on.
That's true.
How about from, I don't want to say the other side, but yeah. So for a bigger organization, how do you make sure that DE&I is really integrated into the fiber of the organization?
Oh, this is, Sheila, you can jump in, but we have a fairly new. It
Sheila, you
starts
can
at the
jump in.
top,
Oh.
guys. And excuse me?
Oh, no, you froze for a second.
Oh, okay. We have a
You're back.
fairly new CEO, Andy Owen, and it starts from the top. And you have to have leadership that's diverse and has lived experiences, or you can't walk the talk. And we do have that now. We didn't have that, several years ago, but that makes a difference. And in a smaller company, to your point, it's a little easier to make that happen more quickly. But I think you're seeing a shift in corporate America, and I think you'll see it continue.
Yeah, and to go off from that and to kind of add on to what Linda mentioned earlier with partnering with these smaller nonprofits that are doing a really great job, how can we help bridge that gap? So going out to the high school, to various high schools, and just giving them awareness to the different design opportunities that we have. And then with that, like kind of leveling up and offering some sort of scholarship and education just to make it a little bit more attainable. And smaller companies, I could see doing this in a low cost way as well by providing mentorship opportunities. So having some of your design employees have a mentorship program with the local high schools.
So building the pipeline before they're even actually candidates, instead of waiting to find a pipeline that's readily available for you. Anything, Sonia, from the OkCupid side that you found has been effective within the organization?
I would say from my past, from Estee Lauder, my Estee Lauder days working in cosmetics and in beauty, I always would ask myself, what happens if we're not being inclusive? What happens if we're not being diverse? Are we leaving money on the table? Are we missing a whole segment of population? And as the Black woman myself, I know we have special needs as well just for our beauty products. But I always just say, what happens if we're not diverse? What opportunities are we missing? And you see some designer brands that might have some very insensitive t-shirt designs, and you can tell they didn't have a diverse person as part of the decision making. So you're alienating, but you're also forgetting people. So you always want to have that sort of view of who else can I include? Who am I missing?
That's a great point.
No, that's a good point, and it's does speak to a couple different angles. So somebody else had asked about authenticity, and I think that's something important because we've heard several mentions about authenticity. So how do you maintain that so that it's not just pandering, but that it is kind of authentic efforts, whether it's in outreach or whether, especially I think in product and business, so that you don't become another case of like, remember the Bic pen that was pink and it was like a pen for women? It's like the most famous example. Hopefully they're not a sponsor. But I think it's a good question around how do you maintain authenticity, but still, as you said, Sonia, make sure that you're appealing or that you're creating products and services that are for different audiences.
I would say just quickly, to be authentic, I think you have to continue asking questions. Don't think you know it all. No matter how diverse your team is, don't assume, don't think you know it all. And if you don't know it, it's okay to be transparent about it and say that you're trying. It's okay to invite conversation. But when you start acting like you might know, or you might not really be an authority, you will lose that. And authenticity equals consistency in my view as well. Just be consistent.
Ask questions, be consistent. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I definitely agree with that. I think what's now happening, the shift that Linda was talking about, is that we definitely are seeing more inclusion in teams, but just because, if you have a, 50 people team and you have 2 people of color on that team, that doesn't necessarily mean that team is very inclusive, right? Like it is maybe inclusive for the other 48 people on the team, but not for the 2. So I think consistency really matters there. Like you have to continue to seek that diversity within the team and not just necessarily settle in representation. And if you don't necessarily, have that in your team, and if you are a small team, like in a small business, you can collaborate. And you just need to, collaborate in the right terms, meaning like really collaborating people, not just seeking out their advice and not compensating them and, using them in the sort of like the advertisement of things, but really like collaborating throughout. Because we are a much more smaller team, compared to Herman Miller. And I would also say like we represent many different countries and nationalities, but there are still many, probably races or different abilities that we don't represent in the team. But you can't seek out that collaboration. You just need to treat people right. And I think that there the consistency matters. And if you have that built into your process and the team, I think that's the only way the outcome becomes authentic, and which is why where we sort of like use that word. But yeah, I think there's a big tie with consistency.
Yeah, sorry. The only thing I would add to that is the person was also asking about marketing campaigns and it looking like lip service. I couldn't agree more. I think it's actually very hard because you saw kind of, with Black Lives Matter, okay, everybody posted something. Okay, so what does that really mean? And, I feel it's worse to be seen as lip service than to kind of pause for a minute and do something that's meaningful. So I think it's actually very hard. And when you say, how do you do it? I think we're all trying to figure it out, because when you get out there and launch, like, our campaign about beauty comes in all stripes, or what we want to do as a brand, and we're small and we want to make an impact, we want to make sure, to your point, the person that asked the question, that we don't come off like we're just doing it because it seems like a good time to do it. And we're going to get consumers and we want to check that box. So I think it's going to be important in how the brand is deployed and how the brand shows up on a consistent basis to what everybody else is saying, and how you measure impact, I think, is what holds you accountable. Because a lot of the time we can throw these things out, but one of the things we talk a lot about on the team, okay, what's that impact that we're hoping to have, even if it's small, but at least that it's meaningful. But it's definitely a tough one.
The thing, the consumers will keep, for large companies like us, they are demanding that brands have that authenticity and that consistency. And we encourage that, because there's no way that, we're not going to hold ourselves accountable if we're not doing the right thing for our customers and our stakeholders. So this is hopefully, like I said, a shift that we will see continuing. Sheila, I didn't mean to jump in. I think you were going to say something.
No, I think you captured it really well.
So what I think I heard is that it's about the authenticity of intent, that being truly empathetic and being authentic about what you're doing, and not just looking at it as an after the fact, whether it's reacting too quickly, as mentioned, or just looking at, waiting until you're getting to a marketing campaign in order to consider it, which is, I think, is a message we've heard from quite a few of you throughout. So I think that's something that's really important to reiterate. I guess we only have a couple more minutes, and I think what we can do is kind of a quick going around, just to say, really quickly, what's some advice that you would give a young professional who's entering, the workforce, and that's truly believes in diversity and inclusion, so that they can apply diversity and inclusion lens to everything that they do? What advice might you give?
I would have them continue to question the company that they're working for and their immediate team with what practices that they're doing to be more inclusive. And kind of touching on what Pinar mentioned earlier in the call, is having people with different abilities, different backgrounds, have a seat at the table and be a part of that conversation, so it's not an afterthought.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. Who else?
I guess, to Sheila's point, number one is exposure, right? Just expose yourself and make yourself uncomfortable, and, meet new people, try to understand, don't hesitate to make mistakes in that sense. But I think, especially since last year, what we've been seeing, and I think what we're having more awareness around, is that silence is also a big culprit for spaces to be not diverse or inclusive. And I think we are at a time where we feel, or we could potentially feel, more safe to be able to speak up. And I think Gen Z and onwards are already, we've we've seen the first climate strike even, you know, like we're seeing a shift happening, and we're seeing a generations that are not afraid to speak up, and that is amazing. And I think that needs to continue. Just like making sure if you call out something on, you know, anything against diversity or inclusion, to be able to say something about it is very, very crucial for future of companies and next generations.
So speaking up, we have about a minute left. Anything, Bassima, Sonia, or Linda?
As a foundation, as the head of a foundation, I would encourage you to reach out to some nonprofit, like Global Nomads is a global organization that's helping to train students from all cultures to lean in, to speak up, because you're absolutely right. We have to encourage these young people to speak up. They are the next generation.
The only other thing I would say is lead by example and really be yourself, kind of to the point that Sonia was making before, is it starts with you as a person too. So you being authentic, but also making space for other people's authenticity. And I think, you know, that's a small thing that someone can do, but it's how they show up and, you know, not being afraid to speak up. And you know, I think there's so many, definitely the community is critical, but leading by example, I think teaches a lot too.
Correct.
Right, and then, yeah, one of the comments echoes that for sure, is living according to your message. And Sonia, any last parting thoughts?
I mean, I think I would have told myself, just don't be afraid to be who you are. You know, be who you are authentically and they will follow. But when you start being someone that you're not because you're trained to be, you're not going to be happy. So you have to find a way to break that, be who you are, tap into your passion, and like everyone's saying, but speak up. People want to hear from you, you know, and that's something that we need to just make sure, like, my younger self would be comfortable with knowing that I have a valuable opinion, even if it differs, it's still valuable.
Yeah. No, and that's a fantastic way to conclude. Thank you so much, because I think that is, you know, one of the most important messages is around speaking up and being your authentic self, which I think does drive so much of the change that we're hoping to see. So thank you all for being here. Wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I think each of you contributed in a really special way. So thank you all very, very much. And thanks everybody for listening in and dialing. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.